Yeah, and this didn't come from me. This came from a book called The Discipline of Market Leaders, and it was in the 80s. But he basically argued that there are three ways to win in business. Is one is you can have the best product, two is you can be the most operationally efficient, and then the third you can lean into what he called customer intimacy. If you plan on being mediocre and then you plan on kind of trying to add these like little things of customer delight, I think the risk there is that it will be perceived as you're trying to distract me from your subpar service. Assuming that the robots don't just take all the jobs in the world and then we're all having to kind of figure out, what to do,
It's on the
assuming that there
table.
still will, yeah, but assuming that there will still be work, it's
Yeah,
like, well, what kind of work?
yeah.
And I feel like it will be work, to your point, that is very human. And so, like, what are the kinds of things that we can do that a robot can't do? There are things you just have to do that are just table stakes things that if they're not there, the client's upset, but if they are there, they're not thrilled. And then there are what are called performance features, which are things that if they're not there, the client's upset. If they are there, the client's happy. And then there's delighters, which are they're not even expecting them, but when they have them, like that, it blows their mind.
Hey, if you spent any time in construction, you know that you live and die by schedule and budget. And there's an assumption that strong relationships organically arise by getting those two right. And those matter, but they really are table stakes, the price of being allowed to bid the next one. The relationships that really build a career and the owner who asks you by name, the architect who brings you the next three jobs, those get made in small moments that were never in the contract. This is Construction Conversations. My guest today is Sean Johnson, founder of Madison Consulting Services. Sean has built his entire practice on the idea that you win people through hospitality. I've recently read Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, and it really changed my perspective on kind of what is possible. And everything in that book and kind of what Sean gets to is really never seemingly made it to the mainstream of how we do construction. Sure, there's best practices and there's firms that do this inherently, but across the board, construction isn't generally known as the one where customers are delighted, right? So I'm excited to dig into this today with Sean. He gave a version of this kind of speech to my leadership team at Viatechnic. And it was something that I really wanted to get into and see what this looks like for a PM and superintendent in how they create moments for the stakeholders on a project, for their OAC environment, and how they use that to build more loyalty and create the kind of traction that all of them are looking for in their career. I'm excited to get into this one with Sean. Sean Johnson, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I think you're one of the few people that every time you open your mouth, I listen to nearly every word, Sean, and I don't just say
Wow.
that.
That's really nice of you.
And
Or
you've
I don't
got.
know. I don't know in what way.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know if I action everything, but I definitely try to. And I've thought about the different ways to take this kind of conversation, and I wanted to start with just like I read Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality book and was like pretty
Mhm.
intrigued because it's like a new way to approach a lot of different things that we kind of take for granted,
Yeah.
and you've kind of like built a business and a whole career around
Hmm.
actioning that. How did that happen? Like, what was your journey to making this like a lifelong thing?
You know, so in high school, I had a single mother and got remarried when I was in high school, and he was a business consultant,
Yeah.
and he would give me business books, and I was like, this is weird. I just care about like basketball and girls, but I occasionally would like open them, and there was one in particular called the E Myth that talked about, and I think I told the story. Um, the him visit like the Ritz-Carlton story, and I think he got it from Michael Gerber, but it was just this picture of what business can be, and and I don't think that was his intention necessarily. Like I think he just thought I should know business in general and that entrepreneurship is fun and all of that. But um, he gave me that book, and then he introduced me to another guy named Tom Peters, and Tom Peters was a management consultant at McKinsey who kind of went off and did his own thing. And the passion with which he spoke about business and um, he just had a very high view of it as a vehicle for good, I guess, and that it is possible to think about business um, as a mechanism for like helping people and doing neat things. And you're if you can blow your customers' minds, and if you can kind of create an environment where your team feels like they're doing something meaningful, that's a pretty cool thing. And so I just was kind of enamored with that idea from a pretty early age. And it's just I think you're right. I never really thought about that before, but I do think that if there was a through line in a lot of my career, it's been orbiting around these kinds of ideas to greater or lesser degree. And I'm now, fortunate enough to kind of be in a position where I have a lot of agents. Like I have a tremendous amount of agency in terms of how and whether I choose to exercise those
Yeah.
beliefs. So yeah.
Well, and I think, there's always this challenge professionally of like missional alignment and then
Hmm.
like, like maybe your professional skill set. And I think what is unique about the approach is one, they overlap, but then two, they
Hmm.
also kind of scale up and multiply maybe your professional impact on the world, maybe.
Hmm.
And so, I think to maybe level set with my audience, the in construction at the field level, you're constantly taught maybe two main kind of metrics. It's hitting schedule, it's hitting budget,
Yeah.
and everything's downstream of that in theory. And I think what you present is this kind of third lane of customer intimacy. And whether it's construction or whether it's manufacturing or whether any industry, it is there's things that are table stakes that you have to do just to be in the business.
Hmm.
And then there's a layer on top of that. And maybe how do you kind of describe that third lane when you kind of talk about it?
Yeah. And this didn't come from me. This came from a book called The Discipline of Market Leaders. And it was in the 80s. But he basically argued that there are three ways to win in business. Is one is you can have the best product. Two is you can be the most operationally efficient, and then the third you can lean into what he called customer intimacy. And what I don't remember if he actually pointed this out or if it was just a connection that I drew. But what struck me when I was looking at that was it's really hard to compete on best product, and it's really hard to compete on operational efficiency. Like it's hard to be Walmart, and it's kind of a race to the bottom and all that. But everybody can do customer intimacy if they want to. And I just thought that was really neat because it's just like I can start like um you can decide as a business that that's going to be the lane you're going to go all in on and you can win. And there've been lots of examples of it. I mean, like Southwest Airlines is a famous example, Nordstrom is a famous example, Zappos was a famous example. Anyone that decides to do it can do it almost regardless of product or service that you provide. And I also like that it doesn't require permission, like even at an individual level. It's like I don't need permission from my boss to love my customer. And so very early in my career, I was in like account management to begin with, and then kind of got into a BD, more of a BD role, and um, had a creative director kind of role that was at least partially, sales oriented and market. And um, I didn't have to ask anybody. I could just do it, and it was just kind of a neat thing. And so I think that was a really neat unlock for me because I don't think I've ever felt in my career. I never had the conversation where I'm like, oh, I would do this if only my boss would let me. And it was because this was the lane that I decided I wanted to kind of lean in hard on. And no one ever slapped me on the wrist. In fact, it was like, wow, that's really cool. Like, how can we do that? How can we do more of that? Can you teach the other team members how to do that? So
All right, sponsor break. Lars, real quick. When was the last time you got a new set of drawings from an architect and they didn't cloud anything?
Well, the one that cost me a couple hundred grand was back, I think, in 2017. So, yeah, lesson learned there.
Yeah, so what I like about what Trick Tools is building is they're looking at tools to help kind of remove the mundane from the job site. And I same as you. Every time there was a bulletin or an addendum, I would go back to the designers and ask them to at least highlight or give me a cover letter on the changes. And that was always like pulling like teeth. But Trunk Tools is now automating that. So you get a bulletin come in, it automatically highlights the changes. You don't have to do a thing.
Well, it's also hitting RFIs, right? It's also hitting submittals. And when we think about standardizing ops, right, and providing that, sort of resource to those field operators, what I see it as, it's sort of like this like mentor within the company that structures, standardizes, keeps it moving in the right direction, looks out for risk. And just this last week, I had a QC manager just pass along a submittal to an owner without doing a review because he was too busy and it was wrong. And the classic owner statement is, "Did you even review this?" Right? So this to me is carte blanche. We absolutely did, and think about getting that first pass before your field manager ever even actually has to do the first pass. Someone's doing it for them. So to me, it's about speed. It increases accuracy and helps standardize ops out in the field. Right?
Yeah, and this is the kind of AI that we've talked about on the
Yeah.
podcast, really appreciating, right? Which is looking at ways to elevate the craftsman at the heart of project delivery.
Give me time back so I can be out in the field managing risk. Right?
Yeah,
Yep.
100%. So, all right, if you're a little curious, check it out, trunktools.com/podcast. And if you mention Construction Conversations, you get a discount. Do it.
Discount demos are free, and and you guys get a discount. So let's
That's
go.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, I like that, so many things that we read in books are about kind of organizational change. And this is one, and obviously you built a business that does an element of that, which is
Yeah.
help organizations kind of orient their culture around this idea. But it can be a culture of one, right? To your point about anyone can decide to kind of do this. I think if
Hmm.
we're to maybe zoom up and say, like, what is this? What is it? Obviously,
Yeah.
we've kind of talked around it a little bit. How do you describe it to someone coming off the streets?
Yeah. So, I mean, the high level idea is like, uh, basically like love your customers,
Yeah.
love your team. The the presentation that I gave that kind of sparked this was this idea called the business script, and the idea was, um, I I believe that it is possible to create brand preference, to create the conditions for increased retention, increased repeat purchase, increased margins, increased referral, et cetera, through the creation of what I call delightful scenes. And so the idea is like if I were to look at the customer journey, uh, and all the places where I interact with my client, and if I were to deliberately try to create really magical scenes, kind of across that client journey, and to make them a system such that they're repeatable and that anybody in the team can do it, then my bet is that you will have a more attractive business, a more successful business, a business that people want to work at. And so, um, and we went to a lot of examples of what that looked like and some personal experiences that kind of triggered that for me. But yeah, that's the idea in a nutshell.
Well, and I think what's also like very human about this is a lot of us have experienced it, like received it, or
Yeah.
given it without ever really naming it, right? And I think the thing is trying to bottle it in a way that it becomes almost like a standard operating procedure for your own approach, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think like even one of my early mentors, like he became a mentor because he was a much more important person than I was, and I was a project engineer, kind of coming into a new GC business, and he made a point to like once a week stop in and just see if I had any questions. He didn't have to do
Yeah.
that, right? But
Yeah.
like it was a little bit of intentionality and a little bit of care that
Hmm.
was extraordinary,
Yeah.
and I think that kind of intentionality, directed internally or externally, creates these powerful moments to the point you're being made.
Hmm. Yeah. 100% agree.
I think there's probably some that are like in a trailer maybe now, and they're like, man, the last magical moment I had was being yelled at by a whole host of owners.
Yeah.
And they're trying to think like, man, where would I even start with this?
Hmm.
What would be the message to someone who, when we talk about table stakes, if the table stakes aren't there, right? If you're behind budget, if you're or behind schedule, over budget, what do you have to get to table stakes before you start doing this?
Uh, yes and no. I mean, I don't believe that customer experience is a replacement for product or service excellence. I mean, I think that that matters a ton, and that if you are doing this as a way, like if you plan on being mediocre and then you plan on kind of trying to add these like little things of customer delight, I think the risk there is that it will be perceived as you're trying to distract me from your subpar service. And so
Yeah.
um, I believe in excellence. I believe in craft. I believe in trying to be the absolute best in the world at what you do. Um, but I also think that we've largely like TQM'd our way to like quality in most things at this point. Um, and so in a certain sense, quality itself is sort of table stakes. It's like on time and on budget. Like I know it's harder in construction than other things, but I mean, you know, oh, we delivered what we said we would deliver in the SOW with a high degree of quality. It's like, good. That's what I paid you to do. And
Yeah.
so,
Right.
um, and so it's necessary but insufficient. And so I feel like, um, and it's not to suggest that if you don't do these things, you can't grow a business. I mean, obviously everybody has grown their business to a greater or lesser degree. I think of it as an accelerant, um, and an instrument for word of mouth, an instrument for repeat purchase. And then, you know, with the robots, I think it's an instrument to protect rate, because it's part of the package. But yeah, it's certainly not a replacement for quality. So
So, you know, some of the stories that you tell in your presentation are really powerful. And, you know, there's a couple of themes that we've already kind of hit on, but the really like the luxury resorts
yeah,
that sure, like you expect luxury, you expect nice things,
yeah.
but you know, you told the story of the well, maybe you just tell the Diet Coke story. I thought that was
Sure,
fascinating.
yeah, yeah. So when I was in my early 20s, I was living in New York, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and I went to upstate New York to get out of town for a weekend. And it was in the winter, and we were kind of driving in a like blizzardy sort of conditions, and it was kind of treacherous. And so we got up there and we're unpacking, and I was thirsty and wanted a Diet Coke. And I called down to the front desk and I just said, "Hey, any chance you happen to have Diet Coke?" And they said, "No, I'm sorry, we don't." And I was like, "Okay, no big deal." And so I hung up and just kind of went back to what I was doing. And about 10 or 15 minutes later, there was a knock on our door, and there was a teenage kid who was drenched and panting. And he said, "Hey, I ran into town, and I went to the general store and I bought you a Diet Coke." And it's a small thing in a way, but like as somebody who was raised by my stepfather and was kind of primed to some of this stuff, like
Mhm.
it blew my mind. I just was like, I loved that. And it made enough of a difference that this company, this property is owned by like a larger entity. And to this day, like we're planning a trip for our 20th anniversary this year. And the first thing we do when it's time to like look at a hotel is we go see if this organization has a hotel in that city that we're going to be in. And I said, in like we've spent thousands and thousands of dollars with this organization over the years, and I've told that story
Mm.
however many times, which mean, and I think I know at least some people have stayed there as a result of our kind of talking about it.
Yeah.
And so what I love about it is like the ROI, and it's like indirect ROI. It's like it's the problem, and one of the critiques of this methodology is that at like how do you attribute the revenue, the incremental revenue to it? You can't. I don't think you can. But like I know for a fact as the consumer that they have tens of thousands of dollars of revenue that are directly attributed to a 16-year-old being able to take 10 minutes of his time and spend $1 to delight me, and the organization that empowered him to kind of do that, and to give him permission to do that. And so I just like that story because it's sort of it's like it's and it also I think it also ties into kind of what you were saying about like start where you are. Like this doesn't have to be a wholesale
Yeah.
organizational transformation initiative. It can just be this one person. I'm gonna make a decision to just see this one person and listen to them and have empathy for them and be just a little bit curious and a little bit creative. And you can kind of start where you are. And so I think it ties a lot of those themes together.
Yeah, I love that story. And I think you're right. And I think what's fun about it is it's, you know, there's a lot of humanity in it, obviously, but also just calling upon the creativity of the individual to think through what that means for not just your
Hmm.
style, but you know, you talk about kind of the client being the hero and thinking through like what matters to them And I mean, putting this in a construction context, you have an owner, and the more like the most successful projects I had was ones where I really understood the owner and I understood their challenges and I understood their dynamics,
Yeah.
and I think inherently I maybe actioned some of these ideas, whether it was like a handwritten note,
Hmm.
but I think putting together your own playbook of, hey, if I get handed a new project, you know, maybe I'm gonna celebrate with our pre-con group, and I'm gonna send like actually stealing your playbook, like maybe you
Yeah.
pop open a glass of champagne with your team,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah, how does walk us through your champagne example.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of to your point around like starting where you are. So like when I decided to start this business, Madison, which is we help like professional services firms kind of stand up their like marketing and business development engines basically. And when I started it, it was just me for the first 10 months. Um, but again, like this is kind of in my bones at this point, and um my antenna was already up, and so I'm used to doing this kind of stuff. But every time I would do something for the very first time, I would write it down and document it in an SOP or like call it like a recipe. It's not even like it's like it's like a micro standard operating procedure. It's like when this happens, here's a thing you can do. And so um, that looked like a bunch of things. One, I realized when I was reflecting on my previous business, I had grown an innovation consultancy with a couple other guys for 12 years, and we were really bad at celebrating. And when we hit $1 million in revenue or $5 million in revenue or $10 million in revenue or whatever, like it just kind of blew by us and we didn't acknowledge the milestone. And I think especially with, I think I'm telling a story with my life and my business is a material part of that, or my job is a material part of that. Um, I think good stories have good scenes. And so just like for making scenes for clients, like I think I did a bad job of creating a memorable, like marking that milestone for my team who decided I'm going to be a part of this particular journey. I'm going to dedicate 1 or 5 or whatever, however many years of my life to helping this company grow.
Yeah.
I was doing them a disservice by not kind of being like, this is really cool what we did. And I hope that 10 years from now, you look back and be like, that was really cool. And I got to be a part of that. And so this time around, I was like, I need to make celebration a ritual because otherwise I'm going to get busy and I'm going to do the same thing. And so we have a fridge in the corner. It's called the champagne fridge, and it has a little bumper sticker on it that says champagne is for closers. And you don't open the champagne fridge unless we get a client. But whenever we get a client, no matter how big or small the client is, we have a glass of champagne as a team. And so in the beginning, the team was just me. And, I work in a co-working space, and so people probably
Down in
thought I just had a
champagne.
drinking problem. Exactly. But that was like a system. And
Yeah.
then, and then we have like if we have a client call and they have to bail on the client call and they tell me it's because they're sick or they have a cold or whatever, we have a little recipe that says go on Uber Eats, find the place closest to their house, and send them a cup of chicken soup. It's stupid. It's just like it's really silly. And sometimes like, they don't do a good job of knocking on the doorbell and then it like gets wasted or whatever. When people get married, we buy a champagne saber and send it to them. Uh, I A guy popped up in my feed, on my LinkedIn feed earlier this week. He graduated from University of Chicago with his MBA, and I sent him a copy of "Oh, the Places You'll Go" by Dr. Seuss, and a little note of like, "I heard this is a good book for graduation." It's stupid,
Yeah.
but it's just
Yeah.
like what I feel like is when you have these little things, and then the team knows that you have this place. We have a little
Yeah.
page in Notion that's kind of our like meta SOP. It's called Ways to Love People. Um, like you have a dozen of these. Like it doesn't, again, it's not a wholesale transformation thing, but it's just like something like that happens for one client or another, at least monthly. And so you have all these little tiny little opportunities to like make people feel seen. And again, it has nothing to do with the work we deliver. If we did a crappy job, it wouldn't really matter.
Yeah.
But um it I think it just makes the job feel a lot more fulfilling. And I think my hope is that, you know, 10 years later, even if they don't work with me anymore, like a client will remember that book that's on their desk or whatever, and they'll see the inside flap that's like, oh, it's, from Madison, or the dinner that we hosted with them, where they got introduced to 5 other cool people. And it's just like, I just think it's a really, really fun way to kind of orient your business and then, just orient your life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think one of the things I appreciate about it too is that it's not, because I think we've all maybe, if you've been in a BD or a sales motion, you probably read some reference to like track people's names, capture like how many kids they have, and then
Hmm.
repeat that back to them, or like ask them, whatever.
Yeah,
And I think how this is different is one, I think there's true kind of purpose and intentionality behind it, but
yeah,
second, I think it's layering it into all the different motions of a business. And I think that is where there's a lot of relevancy with construction, right? I think so much of construction, even marketing, is focused on the objective. It's focused on the
yeah,
metrics, the hard data, because
yeah,
that's the kind of industry it is, and it has to be that way. But there's an
yeah.
opportunity, especially in this time of AI and technology, for the folks on the front lines to be absolute humans and see
Hmm.
each other as humans
Hmm.
and create these moments. And I think, I've talked in this podcast before about I think the future of some of these projects from a delivery standpoint will increasingly measure morale and health of culture and all these different kind of subjective touchy feely things. I think will get measured because it matters in terms of the end output, even if we're
Yeah,
really going to think about this objectively. And
yeah.
so I like the idea of this isn't just a BD motion, it's how you operate and how you interact with the market.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you mentioned the robots. I mean, I think we've like every company, like we've gone through the whatever, not stages of grief or whatever it is, but like we're all staring into a collective fog and we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
One of my beliefs, though, is that if the robots, assuming that the robots don't just take all the jobs in the world and then we're all having to kind of figure out, what to do,
It's on the
assuming that there
table.
still will, yeah, but assuming that there will still be work, it's
Yeah.
like, well, what kind of work?
Yeah.
And I feel like it will be work, to your point, that is very human. And so, like, what are the kinds of things that we can do that a robot can't do? And even like, and you can do that from a BD standpoint. You can do it from a client delivery standpoint. One of the things that it's so easy. Like from BD stand as an example, all of my clients get bombarded with these emails that say, "Hey, would you like 10 to 15 appointments on autopilot?" And it's some version of that pitch. And there are these lead gen companies that are appointment setter companies or whatever. And they build a big lead list and they enrich it with a tool like Clay or whatever to kind of know all the details of the people. And then they queue up these campaigns and they buy a domain that's not your domain, but is like your domain. And they warm it up so that it doesn't get blacklisted, which should tell you everything you need to know about the strategy. And it's just like, and they get their like 1% hit rate or whatever. And they're like,
Right.
sales is a numbers game. And it's like, contrast that. So it's so easy to do that now that like
Yeah.
spam is like cold B2B spam is worse than ever. Contrast that with like we do prospecting and we help our clients do prospecting, but my version of prospecting is I send probably 3 to 5 touches a week. But it's like the one I did last week was a company that specializes in like corporate restructuring and like emerging from bankruptcy and like navigating bankruptcy. That was one of the things that my stepdad used to do. And so my email to this guy, first email, never met him before, was like, hey, blah, 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 proof point, saw that you do corporate restructuring and bankruptcy. I mean, my stepdad used to do that. I remember sitting at my dining room table with my dad and a CEO of some company that was going through that. And it was like the
Yeah.
hardest thing they've ever gone through in their lives. And to watch him help them navigate that with grace and like love and either help them land the plane and minimize the amount of pain they were going to have to deal with, or in ideal state, like come out better than ever.
Hmm.
Like it gave him such satisfaction. And I would imagine you feel similarly. And I don't know if that's true or not, but to the degree that that's true, like I would love the opportunity to like help you try to do that for more people. And so let me know if you want to have a conversation. And like my response rates on those kinds of emails is considerably higher than
Yeah. Like,
1%.
give
And it's
me. I will give you all my money. like, let's
Yeah,
do this.
it's like one. It's like, how do I not show up like a
Yeah.
salesperson, but just like a person and like
Yeah.
somebody who sees you,
Yeah.
and that takes thought, and that takes, and so, and the objection to all of this, to the Diet Coke, to that email, is like, how do you scale it? How do you scale it? It's like, I don't think you do scale it. Like
Mm.
you scale it with like having your antenna up and trying a couple times a week to do that for different people internally or externally. And then if you have 100 employees in your organization and they're all thinking that way, and then you multiply that times 52 weeks or whatever, like I bet that you've done a lot of really cool stuff for a lot of really cool for a lot of people, and I would bet that you'll be better off for it. So it's like, but it's not scalable in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to do this 10,000
Yeah, right.
times with a Mad Lib. It just doesn't, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So
Hey guys, if your experience was anything like mine when I was a PM, change orders were kind of a pain. You send the change order, then you spend the next 2 weeks chasing it. Subs are texting you updates. Meanwhile, you have a change order log buried in email. Your spreadsheet doesn't match theirs, and you're just trying to figure out what's actually been approved. Meanwhile, your subs are waiting on answers so they can get paid. The owner doesn't really have the visibility they need into cost exposure, and nobody finds out that the numbers don't reconcile at all until closeout. At which point, everyone suddenly disagrees about everything. That's not a people problem, it's a systems problem. Everybody on the job is working out their own setup, your ERP, their spreadsheet, someone else's inbox. Change orders end up getting stuck in the middle of all of it. Well, ClearStory fixes that. It's a shared cloud based change order log where GCs, specialty contractors, and owners all see the same information in real time, which is key. Submit and track their work. GCs stay on top of status. Owners see cost exposure before it becomes a surprise. No more digging through email trying to reconcile the logs at closeout. Just change orders under control, which is a unique concept. Check it out at clearstory.build.
Well, and
uh,
there's there's power in the curated. There's power in that kind of yeah, putting the time
yeah,
and effort into it. One
yeah,
I think one small example of this is like me and my team. We've talked about like we are in a lot of meetings with customers every single day, and everyone's on a lot of meetings, and we all hate meetings, right? They kind of
yeah,
suck, and
yeah.
so like if we're gonna hop on a meeting, how does our team make a meeting suck a little less is like
Mhm.
one goal that we have. Whether it's
Yeah,
like, can you connect? Can you make a joke? In like, back to table stakes. In this industry, you got to run an effective meeting. So that's
yeah.
that's table stakes. But within that structure, can you drive like a decent meeting that also doesn't suck? Like that's one of our goals.
That's
And someone listening
that's
is
cool.
like, I was just on a meeting with that guy and it sucked. But hopefully that's an outlier.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned this in in our thing, but one of the habits that I have tried to cultivate for the last few years, it started during COVID, because it was harder to connect over camera. Was I try to, well, for one thing, I changed my calendars to like 25, 50-minute meetings so that I would have a little bit of buffer to change contexts. But it was like, I want to be really prepared. So I want to like recap and remind myself of like, what even are we doing here? Which is hard to do when you just jump from one to another. But then the other thing is like, I try to take like 30 seconds and just, oh yeah, because we did this as a team. But I close, it sounds woo woo or whatever, but I just close my eyes for 30 seconds and I'm
Yeah.
like, I try to picture the person and I'm like, how can I serve this person now in this moment? And I just feel like that couple of seconds of intention
Yeah.
setting, I feel like I tend to be a little more present. So I don't
I
know,
mean, when you
but yeah,
said that at the presentation, I did think like, man, I have so many one-on-ones where I'm like doing multiple things, and that's not great.
yeah, yeah,
And I've
yeah.
had meetings with you where I felt like, man, you are fully there. So
Mm.
living what you preach.
Well, all of these are like a lot of these are like disciplines because I noticed the gap in myself
Yeah,
between this picture of what I want my business to be or how I want to show up, and then so it takes a little bit of like sort of radical honesty with myself of
yeah,
like, oh, I'm a basket case. I'm busy, left to my own devices. I'm gonna not show and some days at the end of the day, if you were to ask me like how good I did at this, the answer is probably not great. Like I had a crappy client call or something and it
yeah.
derailed my day or whatever. But I mean, I think just the intention and the awareness of it and just trying to be a little bit better each day, you know.
Well,
Hopefully I'm better than I was 5 years ago.
one thing that you kind of walked us through was this idea of like trying to really understand what your customer is asking for, and because what they maybe functionally ask for isn't always what they actually want, right? And
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
you talked about an exercise of if they had a magic wand, and maybe
Yeah.
I'm gonna butcher this, but it was like
No,
magic
you're good.
wand and a frustration. Like how what's that exercise, and how do you position that
Hmm.
for getting the outcome of maybe that perspective?
Yeah, so we talk about um, I think it's largely related to we talked about this idea of like the Kano model, and so like you mentioned some table stakes. So like there are things you just have to do that are just table stakes
Yeah.
things that if they're not there, the client's upset, but if they are there, they're not thrilled. And then there are what are called performance features, which are things that if they're not there, the client's upset. If they are there, the client's happy. And then there's delighters, which are they're not even expecting them, but when they have them, like that, it blows their minds. So um, the key frustration thing is the question you ask internally of like, what is it that clients deal with when they're interacting with people? There's two ways of looking at it. One is what's the most frustrating thing about their job generally, which requires you, I think all of this requires thinking about the client broader than just the service that you offer. And you
Yeah.
think about like, all right, the client is hiring us for this particular thing, but that fits in the context of their like broader life. And so all of these questions are kind of descended from that. But like one of them is, what's the most frustrating thing about your job? And that might be a dead end, but it might not, because sometimes it has something to do with
Yeah.
stuff that you can influence. Another one is, what's the most frustrating thing about dealing with vendors like us? And so, like the examples we talked about were like, if you go to a mechanic, it's like total price opacity and you have no idea what you're going to pay until you're
Yeah.
done. Or you go to the doctor's office and you have an appointment, but then you have a waiting room. And it's like, well, why is there a waiting room if I have an appointment? Like I should just be able to be
Yeah.
seen. And the idea was like, if you can architect your entire business around solving that, like obviously deliver the service you do, but like, and address the key frustration systematically, I'd be willing to bet that you could build a really powerful company from that. And we talked about some examples of companies that have done that. The other question is the magic wand question, and it kind of can be a way to get at the key frustration thing. Is if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about your work, what would it be?
Hmm.
And it gets them out of a different frame of mind and gets them to dream a little bit and gets them to say things that, again, it might be a dead end, but I have often found that inside of crazy ideas is the kernel of like a realistic idea. And it's like, all right, well, we can't do that, but like, what if we could do this, And it just kind of changes the conversation. And so that's been a very helpful, you know, conversation in like terms of product strategy or service design. It's been a very helpful conversation, certainly in like in a business development context. Um, and then the last question I think that we talk about when kind of creating we talk about how like the client is the hero of the story and you're just sort of the guide,
Hmm.
which changes your orientation from a marketing standpoint, from a BD standpoint. But the other
Yeah.
question is like, what do they say they want? And then what is it they really want? Um, and what they really want often is something like, I don't want my boss to yell at me anymore, or I want the promotion that I got passed over for last year. Like
Right.
it's stuff like that, and they might not necessarily tell you it,
Yeah.
and or you might not have that level of trust yet where they can be that candid with you. But those are the kinds of questions that I feel like start to get you out of the I'm focused on time and on budget and actually into creating the conditions where you can kind of start to think about delighters
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So
Do you have low EQ people you work with where you have to be more like tactical in terms of like if this then statements to like how to craft this into their operation?
it's a really good question. Um, I don't. I think a lot of this is trainable. And the reason
Yeah.
why I say that is like, I don't actually think I am naturally a high EQ person. I
Okay.
think I'm a creative person. And
Hmm.
I think I'm somebody who, when I heard stories like this early in my career, became enamored by it, about what you could create. But like, my wife would be the first to tell you, I've spent a lot of money on couples therapy. My home screen is literally an emotion wheel because, I'll be talking about my day.
Yeah.
And then she's like, and how did it make you feel? And I'm like, hold on a second, let me go see here, So like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
actually am that
Yeah.
connected, with
Right.
my emotions. And certainly if I'm not connected with mine, I'm probably not going to connect with anybody else's. Um, all of which is to say, like, I think a lot of this is learnable. That said, um, I think even low EQ people like like delightful experiences, and they
Yeah.
know it when they've seen it. And like you tell, like the hospitality thing, like part of why it works is because everybody has a version of their Diet Coke story,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I like to tell people, like, just imagine for a second that your customer went to dinner tonight and they said, you would not believe what happened to me at this meeting today with Via Technic or whoever. And then it's like, and then they tell the story. And it's like,
Yeah.
what would have to be true for that to be a really interesting story that people would be like, that's so cool. Like, I think just because I think most people want to do a good job. And I think most people love the idea of being able to do that. And if you can figure out a way to make it a system, kind of like we were saying. And I think a lot of like people that we would consider like low EQ people
Yeah.
are like calculators, or they tend to think in systems.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a way to kind of approach it that way of like, think about your business as a system. Think about the customer journey as like a series of like they're moving through your little black box, and they come in here with this problem and they leave with this solution. And like there are little itty widgets within them, and you can drill down as deep as you want into that little widget and be like, how do we make this widget just the tiniest bit cooler?
Hmm.
I think probably would probably help be a way for them to think about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I think that's a
I
good
don't know.
mental model because I think you're right. There is a systems approach to this. I
Mhm.
think a segue a little bit, but you somehow do social media in a way that doesn't make me want to turn off my computer. Uh, we should say quite a bit. Um,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Practice. Uh, I think a bunch of things. I do think part of it is reps.
Yeah.
The same thing is like awareness. Um, so a couple of threads. Um, I have always been a bit of a student of both my domain and then like ancillary domains, and I got that again, I think, from Tom Peters, which was be wildly curious.
Yeah.
And so I developed a note-taking habit early in my career, and I've gone through various iterations of the tools or whatever, but pretty disciplined around like Kindle highlights or taking notes and abstracting them from books and like combining them into these, like I call them like unified theory documents or whatever. But a lot of Tom Peters said at one point that creativity is just taking two ideas and cramming them together in a new way. And so it follows logically that if you want to be more creative, you need to maximize the number of inputs,
Hmm.
and ideally from like disparate domains. And so a lot of what my like quote unquote ideas, I think, are really just trying to be a sponge, and being good about capturing and trying to synthesize those things in kind of clever ways. And there's tools now. I mean, we can't do it here, but I'd be happy to show you like some of how I do it now, because that's a tool, that's a use of AI that I think is like highly
Yeah.
underrated, is like the synthesis piece and helping me find,
Hmm.
here's everything you've read about Mark Andreessen over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Here are some interesting connections that nobody else has seen because nobody has your exact set of notes,
Right.
that's a cool use case. So that's one. Um, and then I think it's just practice, both at like the art of writing and the constraints. Like LinkedIn is where I spend most of my time, and it has a 3,000 character limit, which I bump up against often. I spent a lot of time early on Twitter, which had 140 characters, and so that was really good, very good practice at
Yeah.
learning how to communicate an idea very concisely. So you'll my posts tend to have a structure to them, which is like, I want to teach you all the things I know about this particular topic and cram as much information as possible into like one
Yeah.
little thing. And I kind of am optimizing for saves more than like likes and comments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's just been reps. But what I will say is like we help our clients do this, and um, usually the first call is really easy because it's top of mind stuff.
Yeah.
The second and third calls are the hardest because it's like, oh man, what do I do? Because the habit hasn't been built yet. But eventually what happens is like their antennas are up, and every meeting, internal meeting, every client conversation, every prospective client conversation are like the seeds of an idea. They're like, anytime a prospective client asks a question, it's a pretty safe bet somebody else has that question. And so I've just over the years learned to be listening for that kind of stuff. Um, and And then I just am, and then I've just, the last pet I think is like, I've just turned off the part of my brain that's like, what are people going to think? Because what I've learned is that they're not thinking about me.
Yeah,
So
100%. Yeah.
they're reading this, like the form factor is they're reading this while they're in line at Starbucks or while they're using the bathroom and they're just doing this.
That's right.
And like
Yeah.
all I really care, like I hope that they read it, but like
Yeah.
worst case, they see my little face and my little headline of how I can be helpful to them.
Yeah.
And then, my hope is that um I don't try to go viral. I just try to be like helpful, and I just trust that if I do that enough times, they're going to be like, you know what, we should have a conversation with that guy. And like, I just trust in the aggregate, and I trust in like a long-term time horizon, and
That away.
so yeah,
There's so many good nuggets there. I mean, the I mean, one, it would be interesting to hear your take on like what do you think the future of social media is, and like this over like just the content's gotten terrible, right? It's like hook,
yeah,
body, like
yeah,
staccato close. It's like,
yeah, yeah,
but I think the
yeah.
other thing you said, which I think really put some things together for me, like my background was business econ coming out of school, worked a year at a
Hmm.
bank, hated it, went into construction, then got into tech, and then kind of back into construction. And I
Hmm.
think having those kind of diverse kind of fields of experience have helped me kind of formulate a really, I think, interesting to me
Yeah,
perspective on these different kind of corners of these industries.
yeah,
And but I think you're right. It's like you have to be curious, and that's where kind of the heart of some of this creativity comes from. The other
yeah.
thing was the note taking. I love to
Mm,
read. I've never been great at note taking.
mm,
And I could pick up a book, any of these books that I've read,
yeah,
and be like, here's one thing I remember, maybe.
yeah.
But I have Notion. I've tried to build out more. What
Hmm.
is? Can we steal your system? Like, what's your system in 5 minutes or less?
Okay, so I mean, it's gone through a lot of iteration. Ryan Holiday talks about this. He's like the guy that wrote all those like Stoicism books.
Oh yeah.
He does it on paper. So what he does is he calls it a commonplace book. And it's like you're sitting there reading. There's the form factor doesn't ultimately matter, but like one version and the original version is you're sitting there reading, and then you have another journal here next to
Mm.
you. And whenever you see something interesting, you just write down that sentence or that line or whatever in your little commonplace book. He uses index cards, and he has these like, I mean, it's I don't like it. It takes up a ton of space, but it's like he's got thousands of little index cards of just one idea. And so when he's reading, he has a stack of index cards, and whenever he sees something interesting, he just jots down the note and then like a reference to like the page in the book or whatever, and then he continues to read. And so it's a little bit slower, obviously, than if you were just reading, but and any of these require some degree of discipline.
Yeah.
Um, I mine has always lended itself to digital. I used to use a tool called Bear, and then I used a tool called uh, Odysseus. And then I
Mhm.
used a tool called Rome Research. The big unlock for me around creativity has been, and Rome Research was the first one, that there's a bunch of them now. They all do this thing called bidirectional linking, which is basically as you're taking notes, you get in the habit of they advocate like any noun into brackets. So like Mark Andreessen or Netscape or digital twins or whatever. Any noun gets brackets around it. And when you do that, and when you're disciplined about doing that, it immediately spins up a new page called digital twins. And then any article that you've read or any book you've read about digital twins, as long as that your notes have that in brackets, it shows up. And so it's sort of like this like ever evolving index of
That's so cool.
topics,
Yeah.
and they just sort of happen on the fly. And um, so that's how I do it. I now use a tool called Obsidian. And one of the cool things about Obsidian is that you can give a tool like Claude or whatever access to your Obsidian vault. So I can interrogate because the downside every other time before was like, all right, I don't have an idea of what I want to write about. I'm just going to open up my Obsidian vault and just go through my notes until inspiration strikes, basically.
Yeah.
But now you can actually interrogate, use an LLM to like ask your vault of
Yeah.
notes questions. And so it's really cool around like, hey, what have I read about, I have a conversation with somebody about um, a CEO reaching a size of organization where like they need to get a lot better around like their financial literacy and like the financial metrics of the business, and they just need to get a little sharper there. And so it's like, what is everything I've ever read about um, managing a professional services firm from a finance perspective, and it'll give me all the stuff. And so then I'm able to kind of turn that into a thing. And so like I love it because it makes I have not had the problem of what in the world do I write about for 7 years now,
Yeah.
probably, because you get to a critical mass where there's just enough of them there. And a lot of it's evergreen. It's still a lot of the ideas from books 10 years ago, 20, like I mean, we talked about discipline and market leaders. I think it's still as relevant as it was 40 years ago. And so uh, and then the other benefit is that it gives me there's almost like a spaced repetition piece to it of by going back in and looking at this stuff. It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that was a really good book,
Yeah,
kind of
that's
thing.
huge.
And so yeah,
I
so
mean, all the smartest people I know use Obsidian. I feel like that should be their
mm.
marketing campaign.
It's a little hard to like I like really simple, elegant software, and
Yeah.
it's a little harder to use than some of the other ones, but it is like once you get it, it's like pretty powerful.
I feel like I heard about Obsidian right after I started putting some work into building my Notion setup. And
Hmm.
I, yeah, I'm in the middle of standing up both. And,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, the system almost matters more, obviously, than where it's being put. And so
yeah.
that system that you referenced was really cool.
I've always said like the best tool is the one that I'll use consistently,
Yeah.
which I got from a personal trainer. It's like the best workout's the one that you're going to do.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah.
What do you think is like for the PMs or superintendents who are like on a difficult project? And you know, one of the things that I liked about some of the things you talked about in the presentation was this idea of how you recover from a problem
Uh,
being a perfect opportunity to create delight. And you know, I think there's maybe an impetus to think like, well, the table stakes aren't there, so I need to focus on getting the table stakes back to where they need to be, and then I can do this. But
mm.
you have a bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like both and. So,
Yeah.
there's probably some parallel pathing there, but one of the observations was when you mess up, that is like the most emotionally charged moment for a client, like in a negative way. And a lot of them will just internalize it and not tell you, and then they just will quietly churn. And those ones that sucks. And then, there's systems you can do to kind of bring that stuff to the surface. But the loud ones are an opportunity if you can realize it,
Hmm.
where um, my energy is very negative right now. There's a gift there of like, I'm going to blow that person's mind. I'm going to solve the problem. I'm going to own the problem and I'm going to solve it. And I'm going to try to go above and beyond to solve it. Where if you can do it, the pendulum like almost swing, the momentum swings the opposite direction. And now they're like, because everybody knows, like they've messed up on their job. People mess up. It happens. How you handle it is kind of the important thing. And so are you using this to try to like, cover your ass, or are you actually trying to like own it and then be like, I'm going to go above and beyond to kind of make this right for you? And I think the thing that we talked about was like in most companies, there are probably some pretty predictable ways in which things tend to go wrong. Like the exact shape of them might be different, but you could probably broadly bucket them into categories and do like
Yeah.
some kind of Pareto analysis or whatever. And so it's like,
Right.
what if you were to design, like as an exercise, let's take a half a day, let's lock ourselves in a room and let's say, all right, let's think about all the projects we've done. What are the most common points of failure, or when a client gets upset, if they're going to get upset, it's going to be because of one of these three reasons or one of these five reasons. And then you design a delightful scene for what would it look like to solve those five reasons. And then you have that as your play. And uh, now because you're not scrambling. Uh, you're not doing it when you feel defensive, like you just execute the play. Um, so I don't know. And again, none of this is a substitute for like pursuit of excellence and for craft, but I
Right.
think, you know,
Well, there's you know there's downsides to an industry that makes repeat problems or has repeat issues, and there's upsides, which is you can kind of playbook around it, and I think that's the
hmm
concept. So, yeah,
yeah,
I love that. I mean, I think literally putting myself back in kind of my PM shoes, you know,
hmm
I think if I would have the perspective I now have, I would at the beginning of each job I'd create kind of a network map of, you know, key stakeholders. And obviously, maybe you don't have to just focus on key stakeholders, but I think there's
yeah,
maybe a starting point. And I'd think through kind of that journey of how they're going to kind of interact with the project. and kind of milestone out how. And I think it's important to have a mix of external and internal,
Hmm.
because that kind of culture piece of it. So yeah, I love this, Sean. Is there any other kind of element of at a project level what you would want them to be armed with as they go about trying to think through, hey, maybe my organization isn't aligned to this kind of approach, but I want the culture of how I run projects to be close to this idea of like customer intimacy and customer delight.
Sponsor break. If you spend any time running a project, you know the answer is almost always sitting in the contract document somewhere. The catch is that it's almost never in one document. It's split across the contract, the specs, and some flow down clause 3 layers deep that nobody connects until it's already cost money. That's the whole premise behind Document Crunch. That risk doesn't live inside any single document, it lives in the gaps between them. And most teams never look at all of them together until they're standing in a dispute. The average construction dispute in the US now runs about $60 million, according to Arcadis. That's a lot of money. And the root cause they point to isn't fraud or bad intent, it's people not fully understanding what they agreed to. So Document Crunch built a platform around closing that gap. Crunch AI reads the documents, surfaces the risks, and it cites the exact page and clause. That's big. So you're not just taking its word for it. Project Assist lets your team act on it, ask questions across the entire project document set, and draft your submittals, notices, and RFIs right from the chat window. And the whole thing runs on your own company standards. So the office and the field are working off the same playbook for bid through closeout. No disconnects. It's live now across the US and Canada. Go to documentcrunch.com/construction conversations and book a demo. Do it. Worst case, you find out your contracts are a lot cleaner than you thought.
Yeah. Like most things, uh, it's ultimately like a change management, behavior management problem.
Yeah.
And I think the nice thing about this is because it's cheap and because it's easy, like in a sense, like it's hard, it's very hard to say we're going to be the Ritz-Carlton of construction or whatever, and we're going to completely make big grand pronouncements and completely reorient the way that we operate our business. Like that's a big ask, and there's a lot of change required there. Unlike things like I came from innovation consulting world. I have a bunch of clients that do various types of digital transformation like ERP consulting or stripping out your CRM or whatever. Like those are big transitions that require lots of stakeholders and lots of buy-in and are fraught with failure and all those kinds of things. This isn't that. This is like
Yeah.
I don't have to make a big announcement. I can just say I like this idea. I'm going to take an afternoon and think about some really small things that I could do in the context of just my client engagements or the project I'm on, or if I'm only internal, ways I'm going to interact with my team. I'm not going to make any announcements about it. I'm just going to start doing it and then see what happens and how do people respond. And I would imagine that at some point, folks are going to be like, hey, I've noticed that you're showing up differently lately.
Hmm.
And it's kind of neat. And you would say, I'm glad you mentioned that. I've made a deliberate decision to try to lean into this, and this is why. For what it's worth, like I think this is something we could do as a team. Like, would you have any interest in kind of doing like a similar type of exercise as a team? And I'll share how I did it, and then we can come up with some ideas together or whatever. I think this sort of uniquely lends
Yeah.
itself to kind of a bottoms up sort of approach. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
love that. I mean, yeah, I think it's a kind of creating this army of one that
Hmm.
kind of gains momentum.
Hmm.
You've been a few years into this now, Sean. Here's the last question. What is one thing that you wish you would have known, or maybe a different question? Like, what's one thing you know now that would change your perspective as you've kind of started on this journey?
That's a really good question. I think I wish that we contain multitudes, right? So like we're all there's fat Sean and skinny Sean, there's lazy Sean and work
Yeah.
ethic Sean, and they're all fighting with each other all the time.
Yeah.
I think I wish there was the version of me that I think was probably a little too interested in like ambition And like it was important to me to be not just be successful, but be like young and successful. And
Mm.
I don't know where that came from. It's like ego and pride or whatever. Um, I think I really enjoy this season of life now because I tell my team internally all the time, like this is in many ways Madison is like my attempt to like reconcile ambition and peace. And so it's like I think we move faster and more aggressive than most consulting companies in terms of our ambitions, but I'm not going to do it in a way that's going to like compromise values or compromise my team's like mental or physical well-being or mine. And I'm going to do it my way. And if we fail, we fail, but at least we will have done it. And like, I think that I would not have been confident enough to do that 10 years ago. Um, and I don't know. And I don't know why I am now. But like a good example, you talk about the robots, like so much of, there are very uncreative ways to use the robots and there are very creative ways to use the robots. And like, we had a call a week ago with a guy that was like, I've already decided you're my firm. I'm going to hire you guys. You refer to me by another one of your clients, and you don't have to do your whole pitch. I've already decided. Let me tell you what I want to do. I want to like crank out hundreds of articles about this particular topic, hundreds of LinkedIn posts. And my colleague after the call called it, he wanted to blanket the world in a blizzard of bullshit. And I said, listen, like, I don't think we're your firm, man. And he was like starting to explain to me like, oh, well, with AI and Claude, I was like, no, 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 I understand how to do it. I just
Get the
refuse. I
mechanics.
just refuse to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I refuse to do
Yeah.
it. And he was like, and it turned into this whole thing about how I'm going to fail and how the robots are coming for me. And I was like, I don't think that's true. You might be true. It might be true. But even if it is, it's like, I just think, like I said, I think I'm telling a story with my life and my business is how I'm doing it. And marketing and business development, I think, is the way that I tell that story to the world. And so it's like
Yeah.
the way I show up from a marketing standpoint and a BD standpoint matters to me. And if it means I grow a little slower, um, then so be it. If it means that the robots beat me, then I would rather lose this way than win that way. And um, I think 10 years ago, I don't know if I would have had the confidence to be able to say that kind of stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think for as long as there's humans, we're going to have to learn how to work with humans, and that means
Hmm.
being human. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the thesis is straight, and we kind of laud your approach. Sean, thanks for taking time with me. This was a lot of fun.
No, this has been super fun. This has been really, I appreciate you thinking of me and really enjoyed the conversation. Those were great questions. And
What? Where should we? I mean, LinkedIn is where they should, these
sure.
people should find you. Where else? You've written a book, Sean, haven't you?
Yeah, it's about like entrepreneur. I homeschooled my kids for a year during COVID,
I
and
love that.
we built a lemonade stand, but the goal was like, how do we make the most badass lemonade stand ever? So
Yeah,
they had their own like bottles with like their own brand and labels, and like they had a website where they could take orders online and like
that's
taught them
incredible.
about objection. Like people were like, "Oh, I don't have my wallet," and they're like, "That's okay, we take credit cards." Like, it was just like
We're Stripe powered.
we were Stripe Power, yeah, exactly. And it was like they charged like $6 a bottle. It was hilarious. It was fun. It was
That's
super fun. So
amazing.
yeah, but no, I think Hire Madison is our firm for any kind of boutique consulting firm, and then yeah, LinkedIn is where I write about this stuff and kind of whatever's on my heart that day. So
I think the more construction related customers you have is a leading indicator of of health for our industry. So we'll check back in a year
all right.
and see where we're
Yeah,
at. Thank you,
yeah,
Sean.
that's awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks for thinking of me.